You're in the way here. Why don't you find somewhere else to be?" That's what my son-in-law said to me, in my own kitchen, in my own house, 3 days after his parents arrived with a moving truck I never knew was coming. 2 weeks later, he was the one scrambling to find somewhere to be. He just didn't know it yet. I want to tell you what happened from the beginning, because the beginning matters. You need to understand what kind of man I was before all this, so you understand why what they did cut so deep. My name is Howard. I'm 64 years old. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer for the county of Maricopa, and I retired early, not because I had to, but because I'd planned for it. I own my house outright. The deed has one name on it, mine. I bought the lot in 2001, watched the foundation pour, picked every fixture, painted every room. My wife Nora helped me pick the colors. She passed in 2018, pancreatic cancer. 4 months from diagnosis to the end. After she died, I kept the house exactly the way we'd had it. Not because I was stuck in grief, though I was for a while, but because the house was good. The kitchen had good light. The backyard had the fig tree Nora planted. The guest room had a window that looked out onto the Superstition Mountains, and I liked knowing that view was there even if no one was using it. My daughter Blythe moved back in with me in the spring of 2022. She and her husband Felix had just relocated from Denver for his new job. They'd be with me, she said, for 3 or 4 months while they closed on a place of their own. I said, of course. I meant it. She was my daughter. I'd do anything for her. 3 months became 6. 6 became 12. I didn't say a word. I refinished the deck. I bought a second refrigerator for the garage because Felix liked to keep a lot of beer, and I didn't want to look at it every time I opened the main one. I cooked Sunday dinners. I stayed out of their way. I thought I was being a good father. I thought I understood what generosity looked like. I was wrong. What I was actually doing was teaching them that there were no limits, that the house would absorb whatever they brought into it, that I would bend. The truck arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. I was making coffee. I heard the diesel engine first, then the scrape of the loading ramp. When I stepped outside, I saw a budget rental, white and long, backed into my driveway at an angle that blocked the whole front walk. 2 men were already carrying boxes toward my front door, which stood open. Felix was directing them. His parents stood on my lawn like they'd been there 100 times. His father, a broad man named Rupert, wore a fleece vest and had his hands on his hips, surveying my yard the way a foreman surveys a job site. His mother, Doreen, held a small dog on a leash, a yappy thing that had already started barking at the fig tree. I didn't know these people well. I'd met them twice. Once at the wedding 5 years ago, once at Thanksgiving 2 years later. They were fine people, I thought. Polite enough. "What's going on?" I said. Felix turned. He had the kind of face that doesn't show embarrassment easily. "Oh, Howard, good. I was just about to come find you." He said it like I was an employee he needed to brief, not the man who owned the ground he was standing on. "Doreen and Rupert's lease is up. They're going to stay with us for a bit while they sort out their next place." I looked at Blythe. She was standing by the garage, arms crossed, not quite meeting my eyes. "Blythe, Dad." She finally looked at me. "It's just temporary. They needed help. When did you plan to tell me?" "We're telling you now." Rupert walked over then. He was the kind of man who entered a room like he'd been given a key to it. He shook my hand with too much pressure. "Howard, good to finally spend some real time together. Doreen's been looking forward to it." He said it like the question of whether I'd been looking forward to it wasn't on the table. That first day I stayed quiet. I've managed large projects. I know the value of gathering information before you act. I watched them unload. They took the guest room. They put a second set of suitcases in my study, the room where I kept my drafting table and my engineering books and the framed photo of Nora and me on the Grand Canyon rim in 1997. By evening, that room smelled like Doreen's perfume. Dinner was the first real test. I'd made a pot of white bean soup, a Sunday recipe that I'd been making for 20 years. Rupert sat at the head of the table, my end. He looked at the soup and said, "You got any hot sauce for this? It's a little bland." I got up, found the Tabasco, set it in front of him without a word. Doreen spent the meal talking about their old house, 3-car garage, quart countertops, a primary suite with a soaking tub. She looked at my kitchen as she spoke, making the comparison available without stating it. The little dog sat in her lap and ate pieces of bread she tore off for it. That night I lay in bed and listened to the house. It sounded different, heavier. The violations accumulated fast after that. By day 2, Rupert had changed the thermostat. I kept it at 74. He liked 68. I'd come downstairs in the morning to find it dropped overnight. By day 3, his truck sat in my garage, my spot where I'd parked for 16 years, and my car sat in the driveway in the sun. Day 4, I found my files moved off my drafting table. Needed the surface, Felix said, not looking up from his laptop. On day 5, I went to the kitchen cabinet where I kept my mugs and found them reorganized. Nora had given me a set of ceramic mugs she'd bought at a craft fair in Sedona. Dark blue glaze, slightly uneven in the way handmade things are. She'd been proud of finding them. I kept them front and center. Now they were in the back, pushed behind a row of Doreen's matching white porcelain. I stood there in the dark kitchen, one of Nora's mugs in my hand, and something settled inside me. Not anger. Anger would have made me loud, and loud would have been a mistake. What I felt was colder than anger, more deliberate. On the 6th morning, I came down at 7 to find all 4 of them seated at my kitchen table. Felix and Blythe had never been awake before 8 in the 6 months they'd lived here. Rupert had never been up before 9. But here they all were, coffee made, food out, waiting. Blythe started speaking before I'd even sat down. "Dad, we need to talk about the space situation. With 4 adults in the house, things are tight, we've been thinking." She paused. "Maybe it would make more sense for you to take the study. It's a smaller footprint for one person, and Rupert and Doreen could use the master suite. It's just more logical." I set my coffee cup down very carefully. "You're asking me to give up my bedroom. We're trying to make it work for everyone," Felix said. Rupert leaned back in his chair. "Look, Howard, no offense, but you're retired. You've got flexibility. We've all got jobs, schedules, responsibilities. You can adapt more easily." I looked at my daughter, Blythe. She studied the table. "Dad, it's just temporary, is it?" "Of course. Then temporary people can make temporary adjustments." I pushed back from the table and walked upstairs. Behind me, I heard Rupert say something in a low voice. Felix laughed. I closed the bedroom door and sat on the edge of the bed. My bed. The one I'd shared with Nora for 19 years. I opened the nightstand drawer and took out a folded piece of paper I hadn't looked at in a while. The mortgage satisfaction statement from 2020. Paid in full. My name, alone, in the borrower line. I stayed very calm. This is what 31 years in engineering teaches you. When the structure is failing, you don't panic. You assess. You find the load-bearing points. You decide what can be saved and what has to come down. I left the house at 9 that morning with 1 bag and a box of documents. I told no one I was going. I drove to the Ironwood Suites on Scottsdale Road and checked in for 1 week to start. The room had a desk, which was what I needed. I spread out my papers. The deed, the property tax records going back 14 years, the household utility bills, all in my name. And this took me an hour to find in my email archive, a message Felix had sent me in September 2021. He'd needed money to cover a tax lien on a business that had failed. He'd asked for $28,000. He'd promised to repay it in installments of $800 a month. He'd called it a loan twice in the same email and said he wanted it on the record as a debt, not a gift. 28 months since that email. Not one payment. I checked every account statement twice. I opened a new notebook and began writing. I found an attorney through the County Bar Association's referral line. Her name was Judith Callahan, and she had an office near Old Town that smelled like old carpet and good coffee. She was in her late 50s, efficient and direct. She read the 2-page summary I'd typed up and didn't say anything for 4 minutes. "Mr. Howard," she said when she put it down, "you're in a very clean legal position. The house is yours. No co-ownership, no lease agreements with any of these people. The in-laws have been there less than 2 weeks. Your daughter and son-in-law have been there 18 months, but have paid exactly nothing in rent and have nothing in writing conferring any property rights. Under Arizona law, they're guests. All of them. What do I need to do?" She explained the process. Guests whose permission to stay has been revoked must be given notice. 30 days is the standard. After that, if they remain, the matter goes to the courts. The notice itself is simple. What matters is that it's properly served. We drafted it that afternoon. She had a notary down the hall named Victor, who pressed the seal with the calm efficiency of someone who'd seen everything. When I left the building with the document in my folder, I felt the kind of steady that precedes a calculated action. I spent 3 days at the hotel reading Arizona property statutes. I called my neighbor Wendell twice. He's 71, a retired county assessor, and he'd been texting me updates. Cars in the driveway until midnight. Music. Rupert's truck parked on the lawn for 2 days because the driveway was full. On day 6, I drove to Home Depot and bought 2 Ring cameras and a set of grade 1 deadbolts. Then I drove to the house. They were out. Blythe's car was gone, Felix's was gone, and Rupert's truck was gone. I had a 2-hour window at most. I let myself in with my key and stood in the hallway for a moment, adjusting to what the house had become. The living room furniture had been rearranged. A television I didn't own sat on a stand in front of the window, blocking the mountain view. In the kitchen, a full set of Doreen's cookware covered the counters. My cast iron pan, the one I'd seasoned for a decade, was shoved behind the door under the sink. In the study, my drafting table held 3 laptop bags and a pile of Amazon boxes. My photograph of Nora and me at the Grand Canyon was face down on the bookshelf. I stood there holding that photo for a long moment, turned it right side up, set it back. Then I got to work. The locksmith I'd called ahead arrived 20 minutes later. He was a quiet man who asked to see the deed, nodded, and replaced all 4 exterior locks in under an hour. I gave him 5 keys. 1 for my key ring, 4 spares in my pocket. The cameras went up fast, 1 above the front door, 1 covering the back. They connected to my phone within minutes. At 12:10, I taped the eviction notice to the front door at eye level and photographed it with my phone, time-stamped. Then I walked through every room with my camera, documenting what I found. That was when I noticed my grandfather's pocket watch was missing from the study. I'd kept it in a small wooden box on the top bookshelf. The box was there, the watch wasn't. I made a note. I didn't say a word about it out loud. At 5:22, my security camera showed Blythe's car pulling into the driveway. I watched on my phone as she walked to the door, tried her key, tried again. She stepped back and read the notice. She called me 3 times before I picked up. "Dad, what did you do?" "My key doesn't work. I changed the locks." "You can't do that. We live there. You're guests." The notice on the door explains your status under Arizona law. You have 30 days? 30 days? "Dad, my parents-in-law are 67 years old. You can't just..." "They're not your parents-in-law in this context. They're guests who arrived without my permission. The notice applies to them first. All further questions go to my attorney, Judith Callahan." I gave her the number. She was still talking when I ended the call. Felix called 6 minutes later. His voice had an edge I'd never heard before, something between anger and fear. "This is insane, Howard. You're being vindictive. I'm protecting my property. There's a difference. Our stuff is in there. Doreen's medication. We need access. Essential personal items and medications can be retrieved by appointment. Call my attorney." He hung up. At 6:15, my camera caught Rupert reading the notice. He read it twice, then he pulled out his phone. He called my number 4 times. I didn't answer. Later, I listened to his voicemail. It was loud and specific about what he planned to do to me legally. Empty threats, the kind that people make when they realize they have no actual leverage. Doreen left a voicemail after Rupert. She cried through most of it. She talked about her age, her health, her faith, her disbelief that a man could do this to his own family. It was a performance, and a skillful one. I didn't doubt she was genuinely upset. But genuine upset is not the same as being in the right. That night I sat in my recliner in my house, thermostat at 74 degrees, Nora's mug on the table beside me, and for the first time in 10 days I could feel my chest open enough to breathe. My neighbor Wendell had become my unofficial intelligence network. 3 days after the lockout, he called to tell me Felix had been seen at the house early in the morning, trying the back door. The camera confirmed it. I logged the timestamp and forwarded the footage to Judith. She called the next day. Their attorney sent a letter claiming Felix has established legal residency and cannot be removed without a formal eviction proceeding. What does that mean for us? It means they hired someone who doesn't know Arizona property law as well as they think. Felix is an adult child living rent-free with no lease agreement. That does not constitute tenancy. I'll have a response drafted by tomorrow. The rebuttal she sent was 4 pages of statute citations that dismantled their argument at every point. Their attorney withdrew the letter within a week. I know because Judith forwarded me the notification with a subject line that said, "As expected." 17 days into the hotel, I was sorting through my email archive when I found something that tipped everything further. A forwarded thread from 2022. Felix had originally sent it from his personal account and CC'd Blythe. They'd been discussing the timeline for moving on from my house. Blythe had written, in plain language, that they could probably stay as long as they needed to because, and I read this twice to make sure I wasn't misreading it, Dad won't say anything. He never does. I sat with that for a while. Then I added it to the folder. On day 20, Blythe appeared at my door at the hotel. She'd found out where I was staying through Felix's cousin who worked near Scottsdale Road. She sat across from me in the small room and looked at her hands. "I handled this badly," she said. "I know that. Tell me about the apartment." She looked up. "What apartment?" "Rupert and Doreen's. The one they supposedly gave up." Something moved across her face. She recovered fast, but not fast enough. "They sold their condo. They had to vacate. I spoke to someone in their building's HOA last week. The condo is still listed as an active unit. Dues are being paid. It's not sold." The color left her face so completely that for a moment she looked like someone else. That might be an error." "It's not an error." Silence. "They had a condo the whole time," I said. "They didn't need to come here." "You knew that." She didn't deny it. She started talking about how difficult things had been for them financially. How Rupert's retirement hadn't worked out the way they'd planned. How they wanted to save money for a year before buying something new. How it had seemed like the simplest solution. "The simplest solution," I said slowly, "was to move 4 people into my house without asking me. We thought you'd say yes. You didn't ask, because you thought you didn't have to." I stood up and opened the door. "The eviction stands. Every day of the notice period. Call Judith if you need to arrange access to your belongings." She left without another word. I called Judith the next morning. "File the loan recovery case. $28,000 principal plus interest." The process server found Felix at his office in Chandler on a Thursday. He walked out of a meeting to find a manila envelope waiting for him at the reception desk. He left work at 2 in the afternoon. I know because Wendell's daughter worked 2 blocks away and saw his car. Felix called me that night. His voice was unsteady in a way I hadn't heard before. "You're suing me. Your own son-in-law. I'm collecting a debt. You borrowed $28,000 and called it a loan in writing. That was 28 months ago. The math on interest is straightforward. I was going to pay you back. You know that. You had 28 opportunities to make a payment. You made 0. Family doesn't sue family. Family asks before moving their parents into someone's house." He hung up. He tried back twice. I didn't answer. Judith was precise and thorough. Our evidence partner had the original email with the loan language, the bank transfer confirmation, every account statement showing 0 repayments, a spreadsheet calculating principal and interest to the penny. She presented it to me 2 days before the court date and said it was the cleanest documentation she'd seen in a civil case in 5 years. The hearing was brief. Judge Castellano was a woman in her mid-60s who went through documents the way a surgeon goes through tissue, with minimal motion and maximum precision. She looked at Felix's email. She read the key sentence aloud. "Dad, this is a loan, not a gift. I'll pay you back." She looked up at Felix. "Did you write this?" "Yes." "Have you made any repayments in 28 months? A long pause. "No, Your Honor." Judgment for the plaintiff. The gavel came down at 10:47 in the morning. Outside the courtroom, Judith said they would try to miss payments. She explained the enforcement options. Wage garnishment after 2 misses, asset liens after 4. I thanked her and drove back to my house, and sat in my kitchen drinking coffee. 3 weeks after the court date, Wendell called me while I was in the backyard checking on Nora's fig tree. "Howard, think you should know. There was a storage pod delivered to Felix and Blythe's new apartment this morning. Big one, and Rupert's truck is gone. Saw a for sale sign in it last week." I thanked him. I had found my grandfather's watch. I'd discovered it, 6 days after the lockout, in the pocket of a jacket hanging in my own closet, a jacket that belonged to Rupert. He'd apparently gone through my study and pocketed it. Probably thinking it was decorative, probably not understanding what it was. I photographed it in the jacket pocket before removing it. I had it appraised. The watch was worth $400. I added it to the property damage claim, along with the scratches on my hardwood floor from furniture being dragged, a broken towel bar in the guest bathroom, and a water stain on my study ceiling from a humidifier Doreen had placed directly under the ceiling vent. A professional assessor named Douglas Pratt, came through the house with a camera and a clipboard. His report was 14 pages. Total documented damage, 6,200. We served Rupert and Doreen with a demand letter. Rupert called me. He was enraged in the way men are when they realize they've been outmaneuvered. He called it harassment. He called it elder abuse. He said I'd stolen the jacket. The jacket was hanging in my closet, I said. My watch was in the pocket. I have photographs. He hung up. At the small claims hearing, Rupert represented himself. It was the worst decision he could have made. Judge Emerson was patient and unimpressed. Rupert argued the damage was pre-existing. I had time-stamped insurance photos from 18 months prior showing every room in pristine condition. I had Douglas Pratt's report. I had Wendell's written statement. I had the photograph of the watch in Rupert's jacket pocket. Judgment for me, $6,200 plus court costs. Doreen cried in the hallway after. She told anyone within earshot that I was a monster. The court officer looked at me with the kind of expression that says he'd seen this before and wasn't moved by it. I drove home, sat on the back porch. The fig tree was leafing out. Nora had planted it from a cutting she got at a nursery in Tempe. She'd been so pleased when it took root. The loan payments from Felix began arriving on time. $900 a month, court ordered. The first payment came with no note. The second came with a one-line email. Hope you're satisfied. I didn't respond. The extended family weighed in, as extended families do. Blythe's aunt called from Oregon. My brother-in-law from Tucson. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in 4 years. They'd all heard the same version, that I'd thrown an elderly couple onto the street, sued my son-in-law out of spite, and destroyed my daughter's marriage. I listened to each of them. I said I understood they only had one side. I asked if I could send them some information. Most said yes. I sent the timeline document Judith had helped me draft. 5 pages, chronological, evidence attached, including the security camera clip of Rupert standing in my kitchen the morning of the confrontation, pointing at me and saying, "You're in the way here. Why don't you find somewhere else to be?" His own voice, his own words, time-stamped. 3 people called back to apologize. 4 went quiet. 1 stayed angry. That one was Doreen's sister, and I didn't expect her to change. Blythe came to see me on a Saturday morning in June. She came alone. She sat on the back porch without being invited to and looked at the fig tree for a while before she spoke. "I'm sorry," she said. "Not for what went wrong, for what I did. I let Felix and his parents make decisions that weren't theirs to make, and I told myself it was fine because you never complained." She paused. "I think I knew you wouldn't complain. I think I counted on it." "You did," I said. "I know." She was quiet for a moment. "Is there any way back?" I looked at the tree. "I don't know yet. I'm not saying no. I'm saying I don't know." She nodded. She stood up and let herself out through the side gate. I sat there after she left and thought about what Nora would have said. She'd been sharper than me, in certain ways. She'd have seen Rupert's angle from day one. She'd have been polite and absolutely immovable. She'd have served them coffee and then handed them a bill. I missed her. I missed her the way you missed the weight of a structure that was holding something up, and you don't realize how much work it was doing until it's gone. Felix's 3rd payment arrived 2 days early. I updated the spreadsheet. 25 months remaining. Through Wendell, I learned that Rupert and Doreen had finally moved into their condo, the one they'd supposedly sold. They were there now, in the place they'd always had available, paying their own HOA dues and telling whoever would listen that I was the villain of this story. I didn't mind them believing that. People who make themselves the victim of every situation they've created find their own company eventually. My house was quiet again. I painted the study. I refinished my drafting table. I put the photograph of Nora and me back where it belonged, front and center on the bookshelf, in the light from the window that looks out toward the mountains. My grandfather's watch sits on the nightstand now, where I can see it from the bed. It keeps good time, always has. One evening in late July, I was sitting on the front porch when my neighbor Wendell came over and leaned on the fence post the way he does when he's got something to say but isn't sure how to start. "You know," he said finally, "a lot of people on this street watched what happened, how you handled it. I imagine they had opinions. Some. But mostly they just watched." He paused. "Nobody pushed you out. You came back." "I never really left," I said. "The house was always mine. I just had to remind a few people of that." He nodded, satisfied with that, and went back to his yard. "The fig tree will fruit in late August. It does every year, right on schedule. Nora always said it was the most reliable thing in the garden. She was right about that, as she was right about most things. I wake up at 6 now, make coffee, read on the back porch while the morning is still cool. My mug is the blue one from Sedona, back in the front of the cabinet where it belongs. Some nights I still hear the house settle and wonder for a half second if something has changed. Then I remember, nothing has changed. This is exactly how it should be. This is mine.